All right, welcome, VetNet. Let's hear it.
To the VetNet, and I hope to everyone, 22 veterans who commit suicide each day is a problem. First responders who struggle from invisible wounds and ultimately end their life is a problem. I've been blessed to do many things in my 36 years on Earth, things that would not be remotely possible if it wasn't for those who served. Um, America's a volunteer force, and so is the VetNet. We're like-minded individuals made up of active duty veterans and patriots, and we're just guys looking to give back to our country. And together, we're going to accomplish our physical mission, overachieve our fundraising target, and most importantly, live by what we preach and continue to bring awareness to 62 Romeo, who in return will continue to save lives by increasing mental health through sleep science for our nation's best. Just and being genuine as possible, I'm here as the captain of the VetNet because people like Ryan Larkin can't be. And as an individual, I have a burning desire just to always be giving back and pushing my body in ways I didn't think were remotely possible in locations all over the world. And this comes from ultra marathons, like ultra swims, Ironmans, marathons in every climate imaginable. And my goal now is to bring that experience to a team dynamic, lead and perform. And then as a team of four, we'll build on each other, motivate with the goal of just coming together as one for our 3 days of fun and tire ride. Nev is 16 years active duty in the teams and just currently not available. I thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to speak. And if selected, we're going to get after it. And I think I might go knock out some pull-ups after this call.
My name is Chris Orzi. I currently reside in New York City. My why and why I'm here, I think it really is, it involves patriotism, service, and I guess loss. I come from a family that has a big military background. My father was a veteran. He served a brief period of time in Vietnam. My grandfathers both served in World War II. And I myself did not serve, but, I was listening to earlier today, a brief video that Ryan's father did recently where he was talking about his service, his son. And, it struck a lot of chords for me. First of all, when I look at him, Ryan's dad as an individual, there's a lot of parallels I can draw from, in terms of comparing him to my dad. He served in the military. He served after military. He went into law enforcement, and his entire life was built on service. My father, the same thing. And so the ethos that, we're talking about here, were instilled in me at a very early age. Frank also talked about his experience in 9/11, which is actually quite interesting. It turned out he was down on Church and Vesey Street, and with a colleague, and he had was participating in it, during the course of the day. He apparently hopped on a fire truck, tried to put out all the fires that were just happening everywhere else from all the gas that was just trickling down the streets. I think he helped save the Trinity Church. My perspective was, interestingly enough, he did not see the World Trade Center's towers collapse because he didn't have that viewpoint. I did. I've 30 years on Wall Street. My first job was working for Merrill Lynch, and on 9/11, I was downtown working in Tower 4, the World Financial Center. I did see both Tower 1 and Tower 2 implode. I lost friends on that day. And I think that feeling has never left me.
What I figured was I would leave this window for Christian just to introduce himself, give a little background from the Marine Corps, Army Intel. Christian, if you want to say some things about how we met.
Of course, yeah. So I grew up in Long Island, New York. I joined the Marine Corps right after high school, 2003, and I get linked up with a guy who went to Brown University. He was uh, working on Wall Street, making $150,000 in 2003 as like a 28-year-old guy. It was incredible. Um, and he joins the Marine Corps, wound up in the same team. And I learned all of my valuable life lessons from this guy. And then we wound up going to the battle for Fallujah. So 2004, I was in 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. We were part of the main effort for the push. And my platoon we just got decimated, and he passed too. And he was someone that, I held him as he passed, and he was my biggest idol. So super brutal stuff. And my platoon was combat ineffective pretty early. And that was my first deployment. I wasn't even in the Marine Corps for a year yet when I was coming back from Fallujah, just how quick it was. And you have to imagine, like, obviously, like, I know, Rob, you talk to a lot of different people, but a lot of the guilt that you battle those are the things that went through your head where you're like, man, like, here I am, this piece of shit. And then all these great dudes die. You're like, how does that even happen on the battlefield? It just always happens. You're like, the best ones are the ones that are dying, and we're kind of stuck here with this guilt of, am I the one worth it? So I wound up moving my career to a world where I had to live in their honor because I had so much guilt of that I was the one that made it out of here. So over the next 19 years, I've redeveloped myself. Like, there's this movie called Summersby, and it's about this guy that he goes to jail and he comes back as somebody else, and he almost, the whole town loves him, but he knew deep down, like, maybe he was fake, maybe he wasn't fake. The way that I looked at my life was I owed these 18 dudes the best versions of them back to society. So I took this one guy who studied vocabulary, and this one had great posture, and this one had presence, and this one was funny. And I created this version of myself to give back to you all. So I've gone through this crazy journey of starting with the Marine Corps Fallujah. That was my worst deployment, but I deployed 4 times after, and just going through that world of, transition. So I get out of the Marine Corps in 2007. They said, "Hey, we'll give you $57,000 to reenlist." I was a young infantry, I was a corporal, and I'm like, dude, F this, I'm done with everything. And a month goes by, I'm going to college, and they tried to call me back for free. So my goal was to do CIA, NSA stuff. So I go to a recruiter in the Army, and he gives me an intel gig as a reserve, NCO, and I get a top secret clearance. I move down to the DC area and work in, I've supported White House. I worked for JSOC for a long time, doing like WMD stuff. So for 3 years, 8 hours a day, I studied cybersecurity on YouTube by myself, and I passed the hardest certifications. I sprint and I get an MBA. So now I have an MBA. I have the hardest certification, and I went to the world and I said, "Here's the deal. This is what I'm good at. I'm good at analyzing risk to tell the warfighter in your language what you need to know to make the best decisions possible." You just have this guilt, and I owe the world so much of myself for all these dudes that passed. So then through time, I get here, and I meet Pat, and our relationship's great. I'm a physical guy. I do those high rocks competitions or marathons. Pat's also a monster. I'm sure you guys, he's just different level. And any time that these types of things come up, I'm always just down to push myself. Like, I love the Goggins methodology where I give 100% for all these things. I like to push towards a goal. And this would be one of those goals I'd like to push towards.
So thank you so much, VetNet. What an incredible presentation overall.